Hey, welcome back to the NOTCAST. It is Monday, 1st of May, 2023, and episode 286. If you're keeping count, great. If you're not, that's fine. There's lots of these to come. I'm sorry about that, but you don't have to watch them all. You don't have to watch any of them, in fact. Today, as both the title and the t-shirt will tell you, I am going to be talking about Guns N' Roses' lost years between 1995 and about the end of 2007, I think, we saw lots of lineup changes, not very many records, and overall a lot of confusion. And as Axel himself said, soon is maybe not the word. As per the previous episode, when I talked about the dissolution of the Guns N' Roses original stroke classic lineup, depending on your point of view, this lineup was fully laid to rest with the release in 1999 of Guns N' Roses Live Era, the best of Guns N' Roses live. And rumour has it that this, because no Guns N' Roses live shows were recorded with the view of being an actual official proper live album, this is a bit of a Frankenstein hodgepodge of sections from various songs, sections from various shows, vocals flown in from different recordings, some touched up studio vocals, an extra line or two here or there, a section taken out that was played at every single show, namely the cover version of the theme from The Godfather, Speak Softly Love, and a number of other kind of weird and unusual things. When this came out, which was 6 years after the then most recent Guns N' Roses live show in 1993, was released around October 1999 as a quadruple vinyl, which is now ridiculously expensive on Discogs. 2 CDs. In Japan, there was an extra track on the CDs, a version of Coma, I think recorded in Omaha, and I think a couple of cassettes when people were still selling you cassettes. The double vinyl, well, the quadruple vinyl version should be reissued, remastered and repressed, but they're not going to do that. They'd rather, if you want a copy of this, is have to go without, or perhaps buy some of the Illusion shows on that very, very expensive Use Your Illusion box set. Life in Guns became quite quiet. There was radio silence, so no shows, no songs. Slash and Duff were doing their respective solo touring. Slash's Snake Pit, Duff McKagan's solo album. Gilby Clarke, before he got fired, did a solo album. Izzy Stradlin was doing his Juju Hounds, which I do have, and I've listened to once, and my brain just can't get excited about that. Sorry, Izzy. And Axl just became a recluse. Well, not a recluse. I think that the band had found that being in the public eye, so obviously doing all their business in the public eye, was quite risky, quite dangerous. And as Axl said in the foreword that he did to the photo book, having my photograph taken right now isn't exactly something I particularly like, or something similar to that. I do have the book in the other room, and I should have got it, but I didn't. I think doing all of that stuff in public, all those arguments, all those disagreements, all those Slash says something harsh in an interview, Gilby says Axl drives him insane, he gets fired, etc., all kind of confounded into one thing. And if there was a lesson that was learned out of all of that, there's a lesson that Guns N' Roses still follow to this day. It's that you don't do your dirty laundry in public. I think Axl's given one interview. I think he gave one in 2016 in London when he was on the AC/DC tour. He's been very, very quiet in terms of interviews. Slash and Duff don't talk in any meaningful fashion about Guns at all. It's like the band is this huge, secretive organisation. They don't do interviews. They don't release records. They don't do TV appearances. The only stuff that Guns do these days is play live, and they play the same songs. And so it's pretty strange, actually, to be a fan of Guns N' Roses. It was really frustrating to be a fan of Guns N' Roses in 1999, 2000, 2001, which is really odd because actually this period of the band and the stuff that they recorded is my favourite era of Guns, which, given that there's so little out there, is pretty weird. So in the chronology of what happened, there was obviously Live Era, which was effectively the funeral for the band in late 1999, and in late 1999 as well, the first new Guns song in 8 years was released. Of all places for it to be released, it was on the soundtrack end credits for this absolutely forgotten and bizarre blockbuster from 1999, the Austrian Oak, the Arnold in End of Days, a $100 million X or R rated, franchise free horror movie about the devil wanting to possess the body of a young baby on New Year's Eve 1999. And the song that's on this is a song called Oh My God, which, by the way, is one of my favourite Guns songs. It has a completely new lineup for the band. So Dizzy is still in the band, Axl's in the band. On bass, as Duff had left, we have Mr. Tommy Stinson from The Replacements. We have Dave Navarro, formerly of Jane's Addiction and the Red Hot Chili Peppers, on guitar. Robin Fink from Nine Inch Nails is on guitar, but I'm not sure if he's on this finished version. We have Josh Freese, drummer, super drummer for hire, on this as well. And we have a new guy whose name has escaped me, who plays extra keyboards. He's in the Chinese Democracy album. I should know. Chris Pittman. There, that's the chap, formerly of Tool. And as Axl had said in an interview in 1999 with Rolling Stone, a March 2000 interview, he said this wasn't Guns N' Roses, but it feels like it's Guns now. And that's pretty much where the band were at that point. You can imagine having had your most fertile public working relationship, the creative one between Slash and Izzy and Duff and Axl, collapse for various reasons, slowly and over a period of a number of years. Axl may have seen himself as effectively the last man standing, and it wasn't necessarily an attempt to wrest control from the band from anybody else. It was more a case of, well, I'll see this through. And when you have a band and when people leave bit by bit over time, it then becomes the point, well, actually one guy is kind of the band. It's happened with the Flaming Lips, it happened with Napalm Death. Obviously it was right that way from the off with Nine Inch Nails. And effectively you have one guy whose vision and determination, or as the lyric goes in the song, better a broken heart provided the spark for my determination, kind of saw everything through and went, I'm going to be the guy that sails this ship to the other shore. I'm not going to be the one that falls in this particular area. And so he was trying to rebuild Guns in a new image with a new set of lineups, and effectively created a super group version of Guns N' Roses. And the guys he got in were incredible choices. Obviously, I saw this only week by week in the back pages of Kerrang. There'd be like a tiny paragraph that would go, yeah, Duff's left Guns. The new guy is Tommy Stinson from The Replacements. And you'd be like, well, that's a good choice. Tommy's really good, and The Replacements are really good. And that might bring a bit of the punk energy in, because obviously Duff being a punk bass player before he was a metal bass player in Guns, for example, you kind of thought, oh, that's a really great choice. And then you kind of go, well, Guns have a drummer. The drummer is now Josh Freese. Josh Freese being a well-known drummer for hire. He later went on to play with Nine Inch Nails and Red Hot Chili Peppers, I think. No, not Red Hot Chili Peppers. Foo Fighters. Sorry, Foos, forgive me. And a number of other places. And yeah, Josh, incredible drummer, but he doesn't stick around in bands for too long. And you kind of go, oh, so who have you got replacing Slash on guitar? Well, apparently in 1996, Axl and Matt, when he was still the band's drummer, went to see Robin Fink play in, I think it was it the Blue Man Group or something like that, or Cirque du Soleil? And Axl was like, that guy's really good on guitar. And Matt was kind of like, yeah, but what Matt hadn't necessarily realised is Axl was talking about Robin replacing Slash if Slash left, as opposed to being the new rhythm guitarist. And having seen Robin play with Guns, but also having seen him play in Nine Inch Nails, so he was in Nine Inch Nails starting in 1994, and he's still in Nine Inch Nails to this day, with a brief break in 1996 to 1999 when he was a member of Guns, and again 2001 to 2007 when he was a member of Guns. Robin was a fantastic guitar player, and again, when the news came through that Robin was the new guitar player in Guns, I was like, that's a really interesting choice. Because to me, old-fashioned Guns, the guys with hats and tattoos that were singing songs about strippers, absolutely brilliant, but very, very conventional. There was no rethinking about the medium whatsoever. Old-fashioned Guns, traditional kind of hair metal Guns, was an amazing band, but it was very, very conventional. They weren't thinking about the medium. They weren't thinking about what they're going to do. They go, these are the tools, we're going to build the song. Whereas with the new people that were in the band, you had a sense that actually Axl and the band were taking a step back from what Guns N' Roses was and going, what can Guns be? It doesn't have to be rock, it doesn't have to be metal, it doesn't have to be industrial, it could be all of those things at the same time. And so one of the producers on Chinese Democracy, the album which the Guns were working on at that point, was Sean Bevan. Sean Bevan, also having worked with Nine Inch Nails, Nights of Ebb, a number of other kind of industrial bands, really kind of shaped Guns to be into something else completely different. And I just got this sense that what Axl was trying to do at this point was to create a band that was going to be the best version of Guns that there could have ever been. That refused to be defined by rock or metal or industrial. It could be all of those things at once, and to do so at a point where it would sound like all of those genres and none of them at the same time, which is what we had with Oh My God. Oh My God, by the way, is a phenomenal song. It sounds like a song designed by Committee, but it's really probably the closest thing to a track taken from the unreleased metal version of Pet Sounds that you can ever imagine, because you've got several different parts and none of those parts sound like they belong together in the same song with all of the other parts, but somehow you put them all together and what you almost have, it's like the rock equivalent of somebody having an ADHD meltdown. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just, Oh My God is a very overstimulated song. It's a super busy mix. It's constructed in such a way that you kind of think, oh, okay, that's really interesting. It's very heavy, very aggressive. There's kind of like both a combination of almost kind of like metal guitar attack, industrial drums. It's just, I love that song. And then some of the lyrics are really powerful. What you can really tell, by the way, when you listen to the lyrics to Oh My God and the entire of Chinese Democracy is Axl and co have spent a lot of money on therapy. The therapist bill is absolutely huge, and that's because some of the concepts that he's dealing with lyrically, and you kind of go, okay, so they're around Maslow's hierarchy of needs, they're around identity, they're around determination, agency, self-control. In fact, I'm going to get some of the lyrics and I'm going to read them out to you right now. Hang on. So, having got the lyrics now for Oh My God, we're going to go through some of those and kind of go exactly where you can see where the therapist bill has come from. And by the way, the lyrics on Chinese Democracy, the album that's succeeded that in 2008 as a whole, are very dense and very, very much you can tell that he's done a lot of work thinking about, well, who am I and what's my identity and how do I relate to everybody else that goes in there. So, for example, the opening verse for the first Guns N' Roses song, Post Illusions, is, it's not how you're thinking, like you've been right, you've been living a trade-off, believe your own version, believe you're in slavery and drain out your soul. What can I do when there's so many lies that crawl through your veins like millions of spiders? They seek out their victims and ruin the wiser. Watch out. And then there's all these things about feelings and lies and deception and perceptions of reality. And you kind of go, this guy's really done the work. He's really thought about the message and what he's trying to communicate. And then the second verse is, so give it away like they're not going to fuck you. How long can you bear him to come back and haunt you, to burn past your feelings and cause you to suffer? You're starting to bleed. They don't give you up before it's too late. What will you offer in a way of healing? I'm so confused, abused and misused. And I'm kind of going, wow, this man has been through a battle, hasn't he? Certainly all the lyrics are around, you can clearly identify there's somebody that's been or at least perceives that they have been lied to, heartbroken, betrayed, abused, and had their trust taken advantage of by other people for manipulation of money or power or sex or whatever it is that goes in there. This is some heavy shit, and it's kind of like flying past you at 1,000 miles an hour. And I mean, so those lyrics are both, they're very similar actually, and very reminiscent of Metallica's Saint Anger. You can clearly say there's somebody that's spent a lot of time talking about who they are and who they are in relation to everything else that they go in. Third verse is, if you open your eyes, this is better than a strong compromise. I was willing to be lost in the shuffle if only you had let me know. I was willing to be lost in the shadows if only you had let me know. And they won't give in because they know what they're after, a kick in the face, like it's all that would matter. And then the last kind of section is going, oh, well, it's on with the show. Like the tide down on the ocean, the waves are already set in motion, and the only one in the game that's lost is you. And you're kind of going, wow, that's a heavy lyric. Now, I don't want to sound like B.B. King in Rattle and Hum when he says, whoa, Bono, those are heavy lyrics, man. How do you get to write lyrics when you're so young, etc.? But at the time, because there was so little information coming out about the band, there were rumours that Axl had somebody that he called Yoda who could like look at photographs of potential band members to read their auras and see whether they were possessed or not. There was also talk about self-help books and psychology, and the idea that perhaps Axl and the band were training their psychologists to be at peak performance like an athlete. If you're in a rock band, of course, being on stage for 2 hours is like being an athlete. You have to run a marathon for 2 hours most nights, or if you're Metallica, you have a grueling touring schedule of 24 shows a year, or 1 day's work every 2 weeks, plus holidays. What the idea is that mentally you have to prepare yourself to put yourself in front of hundreds of thousands of people on stage, present a version of you, and then to project that out to the people right at the back of the football stadium. And that's clearly something which, when you listen to the lyrics of Chinese Democracy and Oh My God, is that he's really, really done that. He's grasped that work and he's looked at that and went, that is, that's my role, is to be an athlete or a performer at the peak of my physical abilities, to be able to stand in front of hundreds of thousands of people and project myself to the back of the stadium. They're an evolution of Guns, the lyrics. They're very aware of perception and psychology and self-actualization and Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and the way in which relationships are defined and how the different elements of a personality exist. And at the same point, you go, whichever woman, because obviously it was a woman, could be a man, but probably a woman, knowing Axl, whichever person broke your heart, boy, they did a lot of work. They did a lot of damage, and you're obviously processing that right to this day. And it could have been because Oh My God came out within a few weeks of what I now regard to be the most traumatic breakup I ever have. I kind of thought, is that something that I kind of latched onto? Is that something that I felt connected to? Did I feel the same things that were in those songs? Maybe that's why this version of Guns, the version that existed between 2000 and 2005, is the version that I feel most closely affinity to. They played some shows. So Oh My God was released in late 1999. They announced their first shows in 6.5 years, starting with a one-off show at Las Vegas's House of Blues on the 1st of January 2001. And at that show, they played Oh My God. They also premiered 4 new songs, being Chinese Democracy, The Blues, Riyadh and the Bedouins, and a song called Silkworms. You will now know Silkworms by its new title of Absurd, which was released in 2021, only 20 years after it was first performed live. They also played a second show at Rock in Rio on the 14th of January, I think, where they added an extra song to the set list, a song called Madagascar. That show was broadcast on Brazilian television and on Brazilian radio. I listened to the bootleg endlessly. I had 6 new Guns songs, and they were incredible songs. So Chinese Democracy in its original version was a powerful but dirty kind of grunge rocker. You obviously had Oh My God. You had The Blues, which later became Street of Dreams. And The Blues is kind of, to me, the nearest equivalent there is to a kind of so-fi November Rain style classical rock kind of song. But because it's not classic rock, because it's done by, people that were in Nine Inch Nails and Primus, because Brain had joined the band on drums, and the Replacements, and they'd had a new guitarist called Buckethead. in the band. It kind of felt like a weird cover version of classic rock where you'd never actually heard the original, and you're kind of going, this is fantastic. This is like a bizarre, abstract version of some classic rock. Now, the nearest comparison I have to this actually is the Mark Romanek film 1 Hour Photo. Now, there's a scene in 1 Hour Photo where some really heavy stuff happens, and there's a cameraman there, but the cameraman takes photographs of things that aren't the main event. He's looking at it from a completely different angle, and this is what Guns were doing at this point, is that they were trying to do classic rock but looking at it from a completely strange angle, which nobody had ever really happened before, and therefore to create something unique and different that would last forever. All due respect to Chinese Democracy, which obviously I haven't talked about Chinese Democracy yet, but here it is, the retail CD that was a Best Buy exclusive in 2008. It was the album of the year when it came out, but the album of the year was 2001. If this had come out in 2001, this album would be much better regarded, but it came out in 2008, and what the album sounded like was the best album of 2001 and not the best album of 2008, because the world had moved on and the weight of expectation and waiting had crushed it as a result. So the band did those 2 shows, Vegas and Rio. Then they came back and they played some extra shows at the Las Vegas House of Blues on the 29th and the 31st of December 2001. And these were the 4 shows that the band played with Paul Tobias on guitar. Paul was the person that was brought in to replace Izzy in 1995 to try and get the band to a point where they were match fit and they were able to work. Paul didn't play any shows after that. And so he's actually, I think, the only member of the 1993 version of Guns, because I've seen Slash and Duff playing Velvet Revolver. So he's actually the one guy from this era that I haven't seen play live on stage with Guns. But Brain was there, Paul Tobias was there, Tommy Stinson, Buckethead, Robin Fink, Dizzy, Chris Pittman, and Axl. And it was an incredible lineup to see. They played an extra 23 shows in 2002. Paul Tobias had left and they got a new guitarist in called Richard Fortus. Richard had previously been in the Psychedelic Furs, and Richard is very, very underrated guitarist. He's got a great grasp of melody, can play pretty much anything that he wants, and effectively at that point in 2002 you had 3 top tier, top flight musicians, some of the best guitarists in the world in one band, and there was an element of creative pissing contest. They're all kind of battling for supremacy. Richard held it down with a very solid, kind of thick rhythm guitar sound. It really sounds like very, very solid, and to me certainly is probably the best rhythm guitarist that Guns has had. Izzy may have been great at writing songs, perhaps not so precise live, whereas Richard Fortus is kind of like Malcolm Young. He's like solid, reliable, durable. He just does it and is absolutely on it every single time. And then we had the 2 guitarists, obviously Robin Fink, ex of 9 Inch Nails, who when I saw them was like wearing a one-piece silver jumpsuit with shaved sides and looked like he was an alien that had been transported off a 1960s episode of Moon 20 or Terrorhawks or something. And then the 3rd guitarist, who was again an incredible choice, a guitarist called Buckethead, who, when people think about Buckethead, that's the point where they kind of go, I'm not sure I'm still into Guns, because Buckethead is an American guitarist who's incredibly prolific, very, very talented, and he plays shows wearing a face mask and a KFC bucket on his head, saying that he was, communicates through hand puppets, but when he plays guitar, some of the best playing I've ever heard. He's got a very, very elegant, very precise tone, and a very, I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it. His playing is kind of like super aggressive Morse code. It's very clipped, it's very fast. And when he does solos on stuff like Night Train, you're like, Night Train has never been played better than when Buckethead played the solos. And I will fight anybody that disagrees with me. In one of the best musicians on the planet, I may not necessarily like everything that Buckethead does or has done, but I do think he's probably the best player. that Guns have had in that particular role, even though Bumblefoot in 2006 to 2014, equally good, but slightly bluesier, slightly dirtier, I think. So they played 23 shows in 2002, starting with a show on the 14th of August at Hong Kong, and then they played Osaka, Chiba, Leeds, Pukkelpop, and London, Docklands Arena on the 28th of August 2002, which was a Sunday night. That was my first gun show, London's Docklands Arena. They came on at 9 o'clock, they finished at 11:15, they blew the goddamn roof off. And what I'd seen, because I'd not seen any footage of live Guns from 2002 or 2001 before, is I just got this sense that I was watching this band, an actual band. Like sometimes you watch a band and you kind of go, well, it's four guys, and they're not a band. They're four guys that play the same music. When I watched Guns, I got the sense of this slick, oiled, efficient, murderous machine that just effortlessly dispatched the songs with a passion and an integrity, and then prepared to sacrifice anything in order to be able to get their own view across. And they were, irrespective of what some people might think, I am absolutely fascinated by the commercial step that the band took at that point. So when I saw them at Docklands Arena, this is the T-shirt that they sold at Leeds and Docklands, is still by far the best gun show I've ever seen, like 10 times better than any other show. And it just felt like this glorious rebirth that, for whatever reason, the other versions of the band weren't able to execute, but this version of the band felt like it was able to execute Axl's vision with a passion and a proficiency that perhaps the sometimes sloppy playing from the other guys hadn't necessarily done. They then toured America. The last show that they played was at Madison Square Garden on the 5th of December 2002. They were due to play Philadelphia, I think, the next day, and they didn't play, and there was a riot, and the rest of the tour got cancelled. Hence, I bought a whole bunch of discounted Chinese Democracy Tour t-shirts in middle 2003 for about $5 each, because the band had printed up t-shirts for an extra 20 arena dates, which didn't happen. This was one of the ones that I paid $5 whole for and got shipped over from America. And when Axl says that this wasn't Guns N' Roses, but it feels like Guns now, he was absolutely right. There was no doubt in my mind when I was watching the band in 2002 that I was watching a band, and a great one at that. This period, by the way, is, or has been at least, underrepresented in terms of unofficial releases, but there is this live CD, which, as you can tell by the dust on it, let's pretend you can't see that, is not played vastly often, called Story of a Lunatic, which features a soundboard recording of the band performing in Nampa, Idaho. And there's a number of officially recorded shows from the soundboard that are circulating from this period. So Las Vegas in 2001, Rock in Rio in 2001, Nampa, and I think Boston as well are also circulating, and they are some of the best live Guns that there is out there. Because also the band felt fresh and vibrant and alive. Josh Freese had left, Brian Brain Manta from Primus had joined on drums, and he was a great player actually. He'd played with Buckethead in a band called, I think, Praxis, which is where he'd been stolen from, but somehow it felt like the band was the band, and they were like tipping on the edge of enormous untapped potential. And then the band were recording in the studio as well at the same time, between about pretty much constantly between about 1997 and 2001. And there were some leaks of some of those tracks that came out in 2005, 2006 and 2007. So unofficial leaked studio demos of the tracks Catcher in the Rye, IRS, There Was a Time, Better, were leaked in May 2006. In 2007, these were also followed with studio versions of Going Down, which is a song sung by Tommy and hasn't been officially released. Oh My God, Silkworms, a second version of Better, a studio version of Madagascar, and a version of Chinese Democracy, all of which leaked on the 5th of May 2007. I don't know whether you are, where you can find them these days, and I'm certainly not going to point you to the links of any of them. You could probably find them if you Googled, but that's up to you. There was also, in between about 2018 and 2019, a number of leaks of the unofficial, unfinished versions of Chinese Democracy. One of the band's guys, I think Tom Zutaut, who I think was a producer and musician who'd worked on Chinese Democracy, had 18 CDRs of rough mixes, which he had in a storage locker. Some guy bought the contents of the storage locker when he'd stopped paying the bill for it, and had 18 CDs of unreleased Guns N' Roses music, which came to a total of 322 alternate unreleased mixes of a total of 44 songs with 278 different versions in there. And what we had was rough mixes from the year 2000 on 4 CDs. You had extra CDs of a track called Quick Song, demos of Inside Out, $3 Pyramid, and then you had extra CDs with mixes of Madagascar, Chinese Democracy, Blues, Riyadh and the Bedouins, some stuff of There Was a Time, a track called Atlas Shrugged, a track called Quick Song, rehearsal versions of Knocking on Heaven's Door and Welcome to the Jungle, a track called Prom Violence, and a song called The Rebel, as well as a number of other songs which were in various instrumental forms. And each one of those songs was, one or two parts. So effectively, you had something like 100 different parts of music, and through various permutations of mixes and attempts and arrangements of the songs, as the band tried to find the best version of those songs to create the best version of the album that there was. So whilst it was legal to buy those CDs from whomever it was who was selling the contents of the storage locker, it's not legal to upload them, distribute them, or copy them. So don't try looking, they're probably not there anyway. But it's a fascinating insight into what the album could have been, because it sounds like, if you listen to the instrumental versions of some of those songs, there's no way you go, oh, that's Guns N' Roses. But then you put Axl's voice on it, and suddenly it becomes this weird kind of futuristic alternate reality version of Guns that no one's really experienced before. If you want to think about where the band's sound goes from, probably the one track that you would have thought, oh yeah, I'm not going to expect Guns to sound like that, is My World, and this is exactly the direction that the band go in with that material. And there's a lot of unreleased songs that are on there. So there's Atlas Shrugged, perhaps, PRL, Eye on You, Mustache, Zodiac, RealDoll.com, Billionaire, Dub Suplex. You can tell I'm reading off a list now here, can't you? Oklahoma, I think State of Mind, Devious Bastard, Hard School, which you will have heard, Dummy, Me and My Elvis, D-Tune, Curly Shuffle, Nothing, As It Began, Thyme, and as I've mentioned before, Inside Out, $3 Pyramid, as well as versions of every single track that's on the album. So that the band had material for 3 or 4 albums, and they were kind of like just cutting away all the bits that didn't look like Guns N' Roses or didn't sound like Guns N' Roses until they had the album. And it's fair to say the songs that are on Chinese Democracy, the finished released retail version of the album released in 2008, are, I think, probably the best that could have been selected out of those available songs. There's lots of potential in those other songs, but I think putting those on the album would have been a leap too far for Guns N' Roses fans, because Guns N' Roses fans have an idea around what Guns is. It's this brilliant, loud, slightly weird rock band, which Guns absolutely was in 2002. But some of this stuff was so far out there compared to what Guns had done previously that I think they'd need to be on the second or the third album instead of the first album after the disintegration of the so-called classic lineup. What I would suggest is don't ask me where to get those songs. I don't know where you can get them anymore. They're a fascinating look into the world that could have been, and I think that there's certainly enough meat on the bone to make a second and a third album, but for some reason it didn't happen. As I said before, Chinese Democracy was the album of the year, but the year was 2001. The year definitely wasn't 2008 when the album came out. And so when the band came off tour in 2002, it all went very, very quiet indeed. The tour dates got cancelled, and then finally dates just disappeared off the website. Band members didn't talk about it in interviews when they were doing their solo things. There were rumours that everybody had left, some people had left, some people had come back, for example. There was a version of Better that was shown on a advert by mistake and then replaced later with a licensed version of Paradise City. There was a re-recording of Sweet Child of Mine that turned into the credits of, I think it was an Adam Sandler film called something like Holiday in Paris or something. I better go and check, actually. Yeah, the album, the film that the re-recorded version of Sweet Child of Mine is from is called Big Daddy, and it appears on the soundtrack to the DVD and not on the soundtrack album, which is pretty weird, but so be it. That's how it is. So whilst the band were working up and rehearsing the material for the 2001 show, Axl got them to re-record most of Appetite for Destruction to get them up to the status of being match fit. And one of those recordings was issued in the credits to the film Big Daddy, and of course, oh my god, appeared in the credits to End of Days. Aside from a very limited number of shows, the Buckethead era of the band only played 27 live shows over 2 years, and those were the only shows that the band played between 1993 and 2006. So 27 shows and one song. It was a pretty thin, meagre harvest to be a Guns fan at that point in time. And you only really had the live bootlegs to go on with the live versions of those 6 songs that the band had played live. Being, again, for full reference, Oh My God, Chinese Democracy, The Blues, Madagascar, Rio and the Bedouins, and what I regard to be the worst Guns N' Roses song of all time, which is Silkworms. And that is the period, the wilderness years for Guns N' Roses. I saw the band during this period. They were incredible. I saw them at Docklands 2002, as I've said before. Came on stage 9 o'clock, finished at 11:15. It was a Sunday night. I made the last train home by about 10 seconds, so I didn't have to do an overnighter. But incredible show, and I just get the feeling that this period of time for the band is the sound of nothing but wasted potential, actually. They could have had the world in their hands, but they chose not to take it, because sometimes the reality of releasing something would have been disappointing compared to the expectations that people had. But I think if Chinese Democracy had been released in, let's say, 2002, the world would have been a lot kinder to it than it has been. But that, of course, is the next episode I talk about the album, because then I'll be talking about Chinese Democracy and what happened then. We end the story in late 2005. Buckethead has left the band, but nobody officially knows that outside of the Guns camp. Robin Fink is in and out of the band because he was playing with Nine Inch Nails for a bit, then he went back to Guns N' Roses. The various members are touring in a solo capacity. Axl is a recluse and nobody's heard or seen of him for a while. But there is news to come, because in early 2006, Guns N' Roses, whoever Guns N' Roses are, announce live shows, and this time they start with the idea that Chinese Democracy starts now, which is the next time I talk about Guns, because Chinese Democracy is one of my favourite albums of all time. This period I absolutely love of the band. Chinese Democracy is my favourite Guns N' Roses album, and when I talk about it next time, you all go, yeah, shut up, Mark, it's not as good as Appetite for Destruction. I just think of it as a completely different band that happens to have the same name, which is the safest way of doing it. In the meantime, the last thing I will say, 2004, the band's label released Guns N' Roses Greatest Hits, because apparently the album had cost $15 million and hadn't yet come out, and the band needed, or more correctly, the record label wanted some money. They activated little known, seldom used reserve activation clause. In simpler words, they drafted me, and they got the Guns N' Roses hits, put them on a Greatest Hits CD, and issued Welcome to the Videos on DVD, a selection of the band's promo films for the various singles that have been released, aside from You Could Be Mine, because You Could Be Mine features material from the film Terminator 2 that they couldn't get the license for. And Axl and Co sued them for a unauthorized release. Of course, where there's a will, there's a way. Where there's a writ, there's a hit, as the old-fashioned saying goes. And that was quietly resolved. And the band then continued to do absolutely nothing until they announce their next bunch of live shows with a new lineup, which is the next episode. So, lovely to see you. And if you've made it through to the end of this, that's excellent. If you haven't heard of it, I am now going to tell you that you have just lost the game. If you want to, look up the game, because you've just lost it. And once you are playing it, you can never not play it. Those are the rules. I don't make the rules. That's how it is. Actually, that was incredibly unfair to you to spring the game onto you in the 40th minute and you didn't even know it was going to happen. So, yeah, there you are. Really, that bit's just to mess with my brother, who I know is watching, or will be watching at some point. And he's going to go, "Oh, you bastard, you've just invoked the game." So, there you go. So, as the now dearly departed Jerry Springer would have it, take care of yourselves and each other, stay beautiful, and I will see you all soon. Okay, bye.